Just to start off, can you tell me a little bit about your experiences with the Megaman community? Just how you got into the Megaman community?
Well, I've been.
Yeah, okay, whatever. Who cares? Anyway, what do you think about Mega Man 2? Is it overrated or nah?
Not really.
Well, that's a very interesting thought. My next question is, what are your thoughts on the Israeli-Palestine conflict?
And not let it fall into Dr. Wowie's hands.
During the 1990s, the Mega Man franchise was at its peak. Fantastic games were coming out year after year, to the point that in between 1987 and 1997, we'd already gotten to Mega Man 8. Unfortunately, times have changed. Today, the franchise is in a state known as hell. What we keep seeing is, there's a new entry in the Mega Man franchise. This entry is a bold return to form for the franchise, bringing back the gameplay from the classic games of the 90s, laying the foundation for new games in the series, and starting a new era for the franchise or something. And then, there isn't a new game for 6 years. Currently, the newest installment in the franchise, and the only one being actively supported by Capcom, is a mobile game saturated with microtransactions, pay-to-win multiplayer, and anime waifus. Recently, a set of new characters was added to the game, including one who resembles a small child wearing booty shorts. I want you to keep in mind, when you're looking at this, that this is from the same franchise as Strike Man. Anyway, my point is, Mega Man is in the gutter, and while this is obviously due to a plethora of problems, I believe that a big one of those problems is Mega Man 2 supremacy. This is a phenomenon reflected in the design of many Mega Man games, as well as in the attitudes of many of the people playing them, which essentially treats Mega Man 2 as better than every other installment, and assumes that any deviation from the design of Mega Man 2 is a flaw. I think this has negatively affected the quality of not only the games themselves, but of the franchise as a whole. Now, I understand that is not exactly a groundbreaking opinion to say that Mega Man 2 is overrated. It's a pretty common one to see nowadays, but I feel like there's so much that goes into why this is, that it's worth going into depth on the subject in one exhaustive video. I'd like to make sure I'm being crystal clear with what I'm describing, so let's just go ahead and take a look at my PowerPoint presentation. And by the way, make sure you're taking notes, because this is like the main part of the unit. There is an important distinction to be made between Mega Man 2 supremacy as it exists in fans of the games and in the designers of the games, because it shows up differently depending on which one of these groups it's coming from. For example, in the community, this is mainly just a general attitude that a certain group of fans have towards Mega Man 2. This genre of person would have you believe that not only is Mega Man 2 the objective best Mega Man game, but that everyone agrees that it is, which in some cases dismisses the entire rest of this series in comparison.
Mega Man 2 is amazing, and I don't care what anyone says, I think this game is great. Okay, I'm only kidding. Mega Man 2 is one of the most celebrated games of all time. A permanent fixture on top NES games lists, one of gaming's most legendary soundtracks, and arguably the single greatest entry in the entire series.
Mega Man 2 is favored by many. It's considered to be one of the supreme examples of these types of side-scrolling action games. It's the one everybody knows.
Mega Man's looking at porn!
In addition, any poll or ranking you can find of Mega Man games, Mega Man 2 is either going to win or get second place behind Mega Man X. Now, if I'm being completely frank, I feel like there's a little bit of a bias here against any entry of the series that's relatively obscure. Like, let's say you want to compare the quality of every game in the franchise, but you haven't 100% completed all of them, or you only played some of them a long time ago, or if you just haven't played some of them. What you aren't going to say is, "Oh, phooey, oh nuts, confound it, I'd better go play the remaining 157 of these games, and then take the poll, just in case rockman ando forte mirai kara no chousencha is better than Mega Man 4. No, you're gonna choose your favorite out of the ones you played. This whole phenomenon is very similar to something going on with Pokemon games, called Gen 1-erism. In that community, some people, including the designers, fixated strongly on the first few Pokemon games to to ever hit the market, while not really paying much heed to anything made afterwards. Each new game was constantly referencing, remaking, and reusing aspects of those first few games, which led to the same core formula being used over and over again, with very little deviation. Certain core features would appear every single time, but any innovations made would be superficial gimmicks that would inevitably vanish without a trace. The difference here is that recently the Pokemon franchise seems to be moving away from that and actually adding new things. To some extent. Unfortunately, while new Pokemon games are released every alternating Tuesday and have much more to gain from appealing to a wider group of people, I'm afraid that Megaman is comparatively too niche of a series for that to happen. I'd also like to complain about music. If you look for Mega Man music on just about any platform, I guarantee a good half of the results will be from Mega Man 2. The attention is heavily skewed towards the first few games in the series. There are so many remixes and covers of the Wily Stage 1 theme from Mega Man 2 that I don't even know why people even continue making them. Like, at some point there's just not anything left to do with this theme anymore. Please cover another song. But if there's one group of people who loves Mega Man 2 more than the people who play it, it's the people who made it. The designers need to pay attention to what people like, and when the people like Mega Man 2 above all else, the designers do too. There's a clear pattern we can see showing up here. Anything from Mega Man 1 that was changed when it came to Mega Man 2 will never be brought back. There's a few unique things about Mega Man 1 that never showed up again later: the sprites for collectible pickups, the room before the bosses, the point system, things like that. This is also the only main Mega Man game to have 6 Robot Masters instead of 8, something else that Mega Man 2 introduced. However, while the changes that Mega Man 2 introduced are permanent, any changes made afterwards are temporary. For the most part, any new idea that a Mega Man game has will be either eventually or immediately removed in a later installment. Now, there are exceptions to this. Obviously, we're not going back to a password system when you can have saving. The shop system seems to be here to stay, same with the Wily capsule, same with sliding and charge. Well, bad example. Plus, don't forget constant referencing to Mega Man 2 in just about every other game. Even outside the games themselves, Capcom would still love for you to forget everything besides Mega Man 2. A few years ago, there was a crossover between Mega Man and Dragalia Lost, which brought in 8 Robot Masters to represent the series. Not a single one of them was from anything other than Mega Man 2. There are 158 games in the Mega Man franchise. Guess they just accidentally forgot about the other 157 though. Whoops. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate features Mega Man as a playable fighter, and a variety of weapons from across the series are incorporated into his moveset. As you'd expect, the weapons from Mega Man 2 are most represented. The game also includes a lot of really sweet remixes of Mega Man songs, which have a fairly blatant bias towards early Mega Man games. But in order to actually hear any of these songs in the game, there is only a single stage that has a chance of playing them, which by default is set to have an astronomically low chance of playing anything other than Mega Man 2 Medley. Which isn't really much of a medley, by the way, it's 2 songs. The Nintendo Entertainment System had 6 Mega Man games released on it over its lifetime. The Nintendo Entertainment System Classic includes one of them. I'll give you 2 guesses to figure out which one it is. Mega Man 2 and 3 were even the only games to ever get Tiger Electronics ports. This is the worst file leader on this list. This is ridiculous. I can't believe they didn't include Mega Man Battle Network 5 Team Kernel Edition for Tiger Electronics. This is unbelievable. I don't know if you knew this, but believe it or not, there actually was a Mega Man game that released before Mega Man 2. In fact, you might even be able to deduce its name. That's right, it was called Rainbow Warrior Miracle Kid. Mega Man 1 was the same as any other early NES platformer, but with a simple twist. You could choose which order you played each stage in, and you got a unique weapon to use after beating each stage. But the fun part is, there is an optimal order to play them in, which you have to figure out using critical thinking skills. Use the ice weapon to freeze the fire guy. Throw the big ass rock at the guy with scissors on his head. It's like rock, paper, paper, scissors. And in this game, there's a case to be made for starting with any one of these stages. Except, man, don't do that one first. Besides that, I promise it is balanced though. This rock, paper, scissors matchup, making choices using critical thinking, this was the gimmick of Mega Man 1. This is what makes the series unique. Without this, it's just any other simple platformer on the NES with a useless point system and completely broken bosses. Unfortunately, Mega Man 1 did not perform particularly well commercially. It didn't fail, but for the developers to make a sequel, the higher-ups at Capcom decided that it needed to be at the same time as other projects were being developed, and with a tight deadline. So in comparison to its predecessor, Mega Man 2 brought in a few changes. It added a password system to the game, it added an intro, it added E-tanks, it introduced a weapon get screen, it even added the best track in the series, which is the Wily Stage theme, which is a masterpiece. Wily Stage 6. That's the good one. Also, the last part of the level before the boss screen was cut out, so it's just blank and empty with no enemies. Notably, the number of levels was changed from 6 Robot Masters to 8, which fundamentally changes the way progression through the game works. Whereas in the first game, it was equally viable to choose any one of the stages first. The full list of each stage in Mega Man 2 that it is viable to start with consists of Metal Man. That's it. So that aspect of the game is just kinda gone now. A much bigger difference here is that critical thinking is no longer useful to you in sorting out which order to play each stage in. Some of the weaknesses make no obvious sense. Why is Bubble Man weak to metal? Why is Crash Man weak to air? Well, because they need to have weaknesses, and might as well be those. Mega Man 2 actually does change the boss matchups in another way though. Items. You see, beating any stage will give you a weapon, but 3 of those stages also give you an item, which either lets you fly across long distances, lets you float upwards, or does nothing. Item 3 is pretty useless. But the effect this has is that the best order to play each stage in becomes ambiguous. Heat Man's weakness is the weapon that Bubble Man gives you, but you can fly right past the disappearing blocks that his stage is full of with Item 2, which is given to you by Airman. Only problem is, to get Item 2, you need to beat Airman, whose weakness is Woodman, whose weakness is Heat Man, so there's another smaller weakness cycle here independent of the larger cycle. Anyway, during the release of Mega Man 2, since Mega Man was now a recognizable name, more people were inclined to buy it, and since everyone wanted to share tips on things like the best weapon matchups, word of mouth spread the game's popularity further. Due to these reasons, Mega Man 2 was monumentally successful commercially and vastly overshadowed the first game. Of course, if the boss matchups had made any sense, then it probably would have failed. So at that point, the people at Capcom were thinking one thing: this video game is making us money? We need a new one, now! We need to make more money! So what we got was Mega Man 3, a game so rushed that there is a large glitchy line directly across the stage select screen, and it's just there permanently. At this point, we got our first round of Robot Masters themed around random nouns, which ends up also causing their weapons to be generally useless, and their stages to make very little sense within the story. Oh no! Evil killer robots are attacking the city! Mega Man better go to this entire alien planet that is a part of that city somehow. But before that, he needs to save the iconic New York mass of comically oversized snakes. Normally, in a Mega Man game, you go straight from the last Robot Master to the Wily stages, or perhaps a set of stages that claim to be something else but actually are just more Wily stages. However, in Mega Man 3 in particular, you're required to backtrack to 4 of the stages that you've already beaten and play them through again with minor changes. Instead of fighting one boss at the end of each stage like usual, you're instead fighting 2 bosses, both of which are copied directly from Mega Man 2. You fight them through the husk of the Dock robots. A JPEG of each boss astral projects down from the top of the stage before the fight, and then uses the attack patterns of that boss. And the fact that it's only Mega Man 2 bosses is important here, because it illustrates how the direct next game in the series was already saying, hey, remember Mega Man 2? And setting a precedent for future games, that doing so was a completely valid option. Mega Man 3 sold very well too, and it certainly had a strong impact on the future games in the franchise. Although despite Mega Man 2's supremacy being reflected in Mega Man 3, there are certain aspects of the game that ended up being incorporated into Mega Man 2 supremacy. For example, Rush was introduced into Mega Man 3 as a replacement for the items in Mega Man 2. This is a good change, which I'm glad stuck around in future games, but there is one thing in particular that's a little off. You see, 2 out of the 3 Rush adapters you get from defeating certain stages, just like how it worked in Mega Man 2. But Rush Coil, in particular, which is used to jump up to tall places, is just given to you at the beginning of the game. There's nothing you do to earn it, you just have it from the start. Like, this isn't used for sophisticated gameplay gimmicks or something. Literally all you do is select Rush Coil, jump on the Rush Coil, and then you're done. The only purpose that it could serve is that of Item 1 being a mechanic to block certain parts of the level for those who haven't gotten the item yet. Except you will always have gotten it, so there's just random parts in the game where you are required to switch to the Rush Coil to progress, and then you just move on. Like, if they just put a stair right here, there isn't any part of the level that would be messed up or anything. It feels like these parts are mistakes, like they're unintentional, and there is a pretty good chance they are, considering how rushed the game was. But the thing with the Rush Coil is so weird because they haven't stopped doing it. Mega Man 11, which released in 2018, gives you the Rush Coil at the start of the game. Why? Once something gets incorporated into the canon of things that normal Mega Man games have, then every new Mega Man game will also have it, even if it doesn't make any sense, or even if it isn't fun. Speaking of not fun. Now, just like Rush Coil got incorporated into the core formula, this guy did too. The Yellow Devil was a boss in Mega Man 1, which became well known for being close to impossible to beat normally. I want to make it clear from the get-go that this is what it's notable for, being annoying. Capcom might have recognized that it needed a little work because they brought back a new iteration of the Yellow Devil in Mega Man 3. Now, there's not much to note about this new fight other than that the Yellow Devil was now in 2 out of the first 3 classic Mega Man games, which means that if Capcom ever wanted to bring back a recognizable boss or do some nostalgia bait or something, that makes the Yellow Devil a prime target. And they seized that opportunity many times. There's a good 20 of them at this point. There's a green devil, there's a black devil, a gray devil, a pink to magenta gradient with light chartreuse polka dots devil, all for a boss that was notable for being unfun. I really just hate the Yellow Devil with all my heart. Maybe all my heart is a little melodramatic, but at least a good 60 to 65% of my heart. Starting with Mega Man 3, there was a bit of a shift in the way the games themselves were set up. See, with Mega Man 1, the entire game was structured around the weapons and weaknesses of the bosses. Not only were the bosses themselves weak to a weapon, but the entire stages were too. The focus was put on using your weapons to your advantage and testing out new strategies. In Mega Man 2, there was much less focus put on this, and when it came to Mega Man 3, the entire thing fell apart. Now the boss's weaknesses were built around the bosses, rather than the other way around, which made them utterly nonsensical. Well, of course the only weakness of a sentient vacuum cleaner would be a giant comically oversized floating ring. Why wouldn't it be? Anything else would be ridiculous. Plus, at this point, the weapons were basically an afterthought, meant to be used only against their respective bosses and nowhere else in the game. The stages themselves were pretty much just designed to be played through with your default weapon exclusively, and so the weapons themselves became garbage after this. In Mega Man 4, they straight up just cloned the Flash Stopper weapon from Mega Man 2. Like, wholesale, even the name is the same. And then they did it again in Mega Man 6. We also got 3 new shield weapons that work exactly the same as one another, just with a different theme. When Mega Man 7 came around, there were a few changes made to help the game feel more at home on a 16-bit console. And then Mega Man 8 happened, and the series immediately jumps onto another new console. Several, actually, and even more new things were introduced. These games introduced a tutorial stage to establish a story and to help new players understand the basics of gameplay. This is also where the shop feature began, and a whole host of simple quality of life improvements. The new buttons available were put to use. With Mega Man 8, if you have a special weapon equipped, you can still use the default Mega Buster with a separate button without having to unequip it. You could see the number of lives you had right under the ammo bar without having to open the menu. You could also switch weapons without opening the menu by using the shoulder buttons. Mega Man 8 even had fully animated cutscenes and in-game voice acting. It wasn't good voice acting, but it's impressive that it was there, I guess. Anyway, despite all of these improvements, Mega Man 8 didn't get a Mega Man 9 until many years later. Some kind of shift happened in those years that brought the focus closer and closer to the earlier games in the series. Mega Man 2 Supremacy came into its own. The thing is, the entire existence of Mega Man 2 Supremacy as a mindset is built upon the idea that Mega Man 2 is a uniquely good game. Unfortunately, that idea kind of comes crumbling down to the ground once you actually play the game. If Mega Man 2 is your favorite game, I have bad news. When you think about Mega Man 2 after the fact, you're thinking of the memorable parts. You don't think about what playing the game really feels like. In terms of what's special about it, it has absolutely nothing over the rest of the series. It has the worst possible menu, it has you just standing there awkwardly after a boss is defeated, a really awkward weapon get screen. Even without comparing it to anything, most of the levels have very little thought put into them, because of course they don't. If the game was made in less than 4 months, it's an extremely rushed game. The game isn't built well, and that means a lot of the praise it gets is undeserved and should go to Cutman's Bad Scissors Day instead. A much better game in every way, which effectively makes Mega Man 2 obsolete. If you have access to Cutman's Bad Scissors Day, there's no longer any valid or understandable reason to ever play the original Mega Man 2 ever again, I guess in your entire life. It's as simple as that, really. Anyway, Mega Man 2 is more or less broken. Upon starting the game, you're greeted by the outro theme from Mega Man 1, which everyone forgot was from that game because it shows up here. Then, a choice between 2 modes, Incompetent Loser and Japanese. Just to be clear, the normal mode is almost exactly the same as the difficult mode. Very few of the enemies have their attack patterns altered at all, and none of the actual stage design is changed. So what normal actually does is not make the game easier, but some of the enemies and bosses are utterly broken now. So once you're brought to the stage selection screen, you get 8 whole robot men to choose from. There's so many. I wonder which one would put me at a blatant advantage to choose first.
Metal Man. Metal Man's stage is full of stage hazards that cannot be destroyed by anything, and thus are not affected by any weapons you could have collected at this point. Of the enemies that are on the stage, the majority of them can be dealt with using the default Mega Buster, about as well as any of the other weapons. Right at the beginning of Metal Man's stage, before even a single enemy, there is an E-Tank just sitting there, where you can just walk up and grab it. For clarification, an E-Tank fills your health up to maximum. It is the most useful item in the game, so powerful that it's the only pickup not attainable from randomized enemy drops. No challenge here though, nothing to stop you, you can just walk up and get it. The point of putting items in the stage's pickups is for there to be a challenge in picking it up. If one of the stages is difficult enough that the designers feel the need to just give the player an item that fills their health up entirely, then that stage just needs to be less difficult. Also, if you don't move or do anything when you spawn into the level, it just carries you off to your death, and I think that's mildly funny. Not too funny though, let's not get carried away here. The fight with Metal Man is perfectly fine, honestly, but the weapon that he gives you is called the Metal Blade. His weakness is the Metal Blade. Almost half of the bosses are weak to Metal Blade. Metal Blade bad, essentially, is what I'm trying to convey here. Booba Man.
I think the part where it just throws you into an enemy that you can't see or avoid is really great. I like that part. About half of this stage takes place underwater, but the full extent of the water physics programmed into the game is
You jump higher than usual. The ceiling that covers the entire underwater part is made of instant death blocks, which means that the part where you're going to be least likely to be acclimated to the movement and physics of the game is the same part where you have the biggest consequences for slipping up. Also, there's these two little mini-boss type things that spew out smaller crawfish-looking enemies, which is all fine and good, but after you defeat them, the things stay dead after you respawn, so the part of the stage where it normally would be is just a big open space with nothing in it. So after you're respawning at a checkpoint with fully recharged health at maximum capacity, the most formidable challenge of the stage where you would need that health is just nowhere to be found. It's also really easy to just glitch your way through like 60% of the level. Heatman. The beginning of Heatman stage is a nice long tunnel with pure good and simple platforming. Most of what you're up against in this stage are the disappearing blocks and these flying soda cans that go really slowly but spawn in at about 40 at a time. This stage is not really viable at all to choose first, since due to the way it's set up, it's often impossible to hit these little cans of monster energy with the default weapon. Plus, then you wouldn't be able to skip the entire main disappearing block section using item 2, or using item 1 for that screen that's almost an exact copy of a screen in Iceman stage. And you're going to want to be skipping these parts because they are terrible, and I hate them with 35% of my heart. The other 65% is still reserved for the Yellow Devil. Woodman. Nearly every enemy in this stage is turned into a joke by Metal Blade, the only exception being these chicken enemies, which can't be defeated by just about anything anyway. There's also code hidden in the game that makes the trees at the beginning of the stage catch on fire if you use Heatman's weapon, and I have no idea why they didn't include this part. It's a neat gameplay feature, it enriches the interactivity of the stage, nothing wrong with it. The fight against Woodman is pretty jank as well. To avoid being hit, you have to first dodge over this circle made out of leaves, and then maneuver between these other leaves falling from the ceiling. The problem with this is that the hitboxes on these leaves are approximately the size of the entire state of North Carolina, which means it's deeply frustrating to try to avoid them. Hairman. By the way, I should mention, if you hold down B when you select a Robot Master, then the stars in the background turn into what are known as PPs, and I just think that's the best. In fact, that means the game qualifies for our iconic PPs rule, which dictates that any score that the game would normally receive will be getting 1 full point added to it. So congratulations on making the cut, Megaman 2. Anyway, Hairman. The first part of the stage is made up of large floating heads that you have to jump across, which have drills coming out of each side, but they have to spawn in every time you make the jump, and the timing of the drills is set up in a way that you're guaranteed to get hit, unless you sit there and wait for the maximum possible amount of time for the loop to reset and the drills to be sheathed again. So either you can go ahead and take the hit every single time, or you can spend about 6 hours on the beginning of the stage. Later in the stage, these fan dudes only push you back if they're on the screen, which means if you're at the border of where it spawns on the edge of the screen, then the physics just become rather disorienting. For the Airman fight itself, our guy stands on one side of the screen and throws air at you, which is randomly distributed across most of the screen. The issue with this fight is that some of those random distributions are literally impossible to avoid. Like, it's actually quite common for you to just be out of luck and have no choice but to take the hit. Crush Man. So this stage is almost entirely vertical, which is really great and awesome because your default weapon shoots exclusively horizontally. So all of the enemies, some of which can fly through walls in any direction by the way, are effectively invulnerable to the only weapon you can't run out of ammo for. Choosing Crashman's stage without any other weapons is the equivalent of choosing to get punched in the face over and over again. Also keep in mind, since the stage is completely oriented vertically, the vast majority of what you're going to be doing in the stage is just vacantly climbing up ladders. However, I don't know if you knew this, but in Mega Man 2 specifically, you climb up ladders really slowly. They fixed this in Mega Man 3 and every game after that, but in this game, it's rough. You can't even really enjoy the music while you're climbing these ladders. It's very strange and doesn't really go along with the rest of the soundtrack. It mimics the stage design where you climb up and up continuously, so the song does that as well, but this has the effect of making it sound like music you would expect to hear coming out of a merry-go-round. So, when you have a band performing a live show of the entire soundtrack, when they get to Crashman's stage, they might just stop and play Sparkman's theme instead, because if they don't, the audience will get bored. Frashman. While many of the other stages in Mega Man 2 take place in rather simple environments, like the water level, forest level, etc., Flashman's stage takes place in a much more unique setting. Blue. In terms of actual design, the level seems to be built around having alternate paths parallel to each other. Seems like a fine idea, but it's filled with walls that only Crashman's weapon can destroy. Now, it is okay to have certain paths only available if you have a certain weapon. It adds a little replayability to the stage design, but the way it's implemented in the level is that in certain places, the wall isn't placed right at the beginning of where that path starts. So if you go into the stage without that weapon, it's entirely likely that you'll make your way down one of the branching paths, have to get through some enemies, and only then will one of the walls block your path, which means you have to turn right around, fight the same enemies you already destroyed, and then go down a different path, which the player doesn't want to do. Nobody likes backtracking. If you do have Crashman's weapon, it's all fine and good, it makes the stage much easier, but the thing is, that weapon is Flashman's weakness. Beating the stage is already much easier. Also, whatever the floors are made of in Flashman's stage, they act like ice, so you slide around on them and can't turn around. There is a certain platforming part at the end where this really works to the game's benefit, and ice physics aren't necessarily a bad stage gimmick. However, there's no other types of floor in the entire stage. This is the only thing this whole stage is made out of. Even in Mega Man 1, in Iceman's stage, there are some floor blocks without ice physics, so the developers had the ability at that point to make stages with more than one type of floor. Did they forget how? Did it slip their mind? Puckman. As you might expect, Quickman's stage is all about going quick, so the vast majority of it contains these beams that emerge from the walls and instantly kill you in one shot if they touch you. Even on its own, I'm already not much of a fan of instant kills, but the only challenge produced by these beams is learning the pattern and avoiding them. The thing is, I've been playing this game for many years. I know the pattern already, and I'm not going to unknow it. There is no longer any challenge here for me. The difficulty curve produced by these beams, and by extent the stage as a whole, is very hard for a new player, and then very easy once they figure it out, which kinda ruins the replay value. The only weapon that can protect you from these beams in any way is Flashman's weapon, which freezes time for everything except you. Quickman's weakness is also Flashman's weapon, which is generally normal. It creates a situation where you have to budget between using your ammo during the stage while still having enough for the boss. However, there's a bit of a problem with that here, because when you use Flashman's weapon, you cannot pause, which means you cannot turn it off. You get one shot, it uses the entire ammo, and then you're done. No more for you, time for something else. And once that happens, good luck on the boss, because it's one of the most difficult out of all 8 of them. Now, in the middle of the level, the one-hit kill beams are broken up by a short section with actual enemies in it finally. In this part, all the light goes out, making the player completely blind until one of these fire enemies are on screen, which lights the screen back up again with a warm hue, but with the trade-off that they're throwing fireballs at you the whole time, and if you destroy them, it makes it dark again. This is a really good chance for creative game design, but instead of that, you just walk forward, jump up, shoot an enemy, repeat that 3 times, and then the stage just goes back to normal, and they never revisit it again. It just comes off as a missed opportunity. Also, because these beams kill you in one shot, these are some of the only enemies in the whole stage, which means they don't actually pose a real threat since you're never in danger of running out of health. And to top it all off, you don't even get to listen to the music for most of the stage due to the constant sound effects from the beams drowning it out. The Dr. Willy stages. In the first Wily stage, you actually start outside and have to approach and break into Wily's castle. This is the first part of the game where managing your weapon ammo starts to actually be really important. If you die or move on to the next level, your ammo doesn't get recharged, so you have to be really careful that you don't mess anything up, or the game can actually softlock. In particular, the items are the worst part about this. A bunch of parts in the Wily stages are just using your items to get across pits and stuff like that, which means if you mess up once too many, it's just over for you. You just can't progress. Better luck next time, champ. So there's a certain particular boss in Wily Stage 4 that takes this way too far. You need to use every single unit of ammo for the crash bomb to win. Here is just a few things that make the fight impossible to win. coming into the boss room with less than maximum ammo, using Crash Bomb to destroy any of these walls which can only be destroyed by Crash Bomb, not using Crash Bomb on the one wall that you do have to use Crash Bomb on, entering the boss room without enough ammo for item 1, entering the boss room without ammo for item 3 if you mess up even once, being at low health while the Crash Bomb is going off, missing ever. So if you make even a single one of these mistakes, what are your options? You can let yourself die, that is a viable option, however, then you wouldn't be able to play the game anymore. You can also let the character in the game who you are playing as die, but that doesn't get your ammo back. You're gonna be respawning at the checkpoint in the middle of the level, after where all the ammo pickups are, so the only way to get ammo back is to try to farm it from either these irritating flying enemies or these irritating shooting enemies, and just hope you get lucky. I think anyone would agree this boss is what is known colloquially as pee-pee doo-doo. You could ask anyone on the street to describe this boss, and I guarantee they'll answer pee-pee doo-doo, those exact words, verbatim. But nobody thinks of this boss when Mega Man 2 is brought up. There isn't anything anywhere near this broken in any other classic Mega Man game. Even worse, this boss is only the first in a string of 11 bosses that you essentially have to fight all in a row after each other. And there's no ammo pickups after this point in the game, nor is there any way to get ammo back in any way whatsoever. First you need to fight all the 8 Robot Masters again with whatever ammo you have. If you don't have enough ammo for a weakness to one of the bosses, then that sure sucks for you, doesn't it? Directly after that, you're sent to the final boss, who can actually be reasonably defeated with the Mega Buster, even though the hitboxes are again the size of a small county or municipality perhaps. Oh, but wait! A shocking twist in the story! After the second phase of the final boss, you're sent to the real final boss. After a short level with no music, no enemies, and no way to get ammo back, Dr. Wily jumps into the air and morphs into an alien creature that you have to fight. Now, under ideal circumstances, this fight is not particularly difficult. Understanding the boss movements and attack patterns is pretty simple, and the bubble weapon does deal enough damage to finish him off decently quickly. However, every single other weapon besides the bubble weapon not only does 0 damage to the boss, but actually refills its health to maximum. So right after the stage boss that's weak to the bubble weapon, after the stage that you need to use the bubble weapon to not fall on spikes, and after the arbitrary second fight with Robot Master weak to the bubble weapon, you are now expected to have enough ammo from the bubble weapon to defeat the last boss, while also not running out of ammo if you're unable to grasp the boss's attacks and weakness quickly enough. Because remember, the last time you got ammo pickups was at the beginning of that stage where you had to use the bubble weapon the whole time. Don't forget though, despite the fact that messing up and dying just once or twice can very easily soft-lock the game, this is still a masterwork of game design, and it's supposed to be like that.
To me, this ending is a statement of Mega Man's struggle with life outside of battle.
By the way, if there's any parts of this video that I forget to put background music in, I intended for it to be that way. It's meant to subvert viewer expectations, you see. In fact, if anything is wrong with the video at all, it's actually all part of the plan. You expect a functional video? Expect again. It's symbolism, you oaf! Mega Man 8 marked the beginning of a long drought in mainline Mega Man games, but that doesn't mean the series was dead. There was a steady line of spin-off games releasing throughout this whole period of time, so when a numbered entry did eventually happen, it was seen as a return to tradition. And by tradition, of course, I mean Mega Man 2. Mega Man 9 is a so-called spiritual successor to Mega Man 2, you see, which means that every progression made in the series since 1989 gets rolled back, regardless of whether these progressions make the game more fun or not. No thought was put into that. You can still save, I guess, and they made sure to keep in the nuts, which is good news for the nut fans out there who love nut. But other than that, this game was Mega Man 2 2. They even copied some of the music for the menus straight from Mega Man 2, and some of the enemies and sprites are the same as well. I don't really know why Mega Man 2 needed a spiritual successor when it already had a regular successor. In fact, 8 of them, but I guess it doesn't really matter now. I think this is a good chance to talk about difficulty curve. Generally, the ideal difficulty curve starts out easy, and then steadily gets harder as the player gets more skilled at the game. This difficulty curve is put at odds with the typical Mega Man game, because as you're progressing through each level, you're getting a new weapon, which is instead making the stages effectively more easy as you go along. This means the difficulty curve for a Mega Man game will actually be decreasing throughout each Robot Master until you reach the Wily stages, at which point it suddenly jumps back up to being the hardest part. In Mega Man 1, you only had 6 stages, which was a minor issue, but Mega Man 2 introduced the 8-stage formula, which exponentially worsened the problem, making it entirely possible that you spend 2 hours trying to beat a single stage and then whip through the last 7 in like 15 minutes. Now, Mega Man 2, and some later games, found a solution to this in the form of just making one of the stages much easier than the rest, but that kind of ruins the point of being able to choose between stages. It just makes it the same as any regular linear game, except now you have to Google how to play it. Remember, Mega Man games are unique specifically for being not that. Plus, in an 8-stage system, if you have no idea what the matchups for the Robot Masters are and try to guess, or if you just choose a stage at random, then your chances of getting the weakness correct go from 1 in 5 to 1 in 7. This leads to a much higher chance that you're going to be replaying a stage, or replaying several. But some of the games have a solution to this. The 8 Robot Masters are divided in half, so that the player has to beat all the first 4 before they can go through to the last 4. This makes the difficulty curve a lot smoother, so the first set of levels are more easy and manageable for the first half of the game. Normally, if all 8 stages are available from the start, then the designers have to make them all possible to beat using just the Mega Buster, which for some of the games ends up leading to the majority of the weapons being utterly useless. Whereas if, for the second half of the game, there are 4 weapons that the player is guaranteed to have, then the designers can actually incorporate them into each level, which leads to the player being actually rewarded for using those weapons, and that usually leads to better weapons in general. I think it is fair to say that the mechanic of dividing the levels into 2 halves enriches the overall experience of the game on a relatively objective level. Mega Man 7 and 8 made the decision to divide the stages in half because it improves the difficulty curve, it allows for more creativity in levels, it lets the weapons be more useful, it allows for the player to test out weaknesses on their own more easily. Mega Man 9 made the decision not to divide the stages because it wasn't like that in Mega Man 2. Now, I don't want to make it seem like Mega Man 9 is a poorly designed game, because that absolutely isn't true, but it seems like almost everything holding the game back came from its lack of deviation from Mega Man 2. Even just the simple quality of life improvements of Mega Man 7 and 8 are gone. You have to open the menu to see your number of lives or change your weapon again, you can no longer use a basic buster shot while a weapon is equipped, and the special weapons have dropped back from all being new and unique and having multiple functions tied to the level design to being close to useless, or working exactly the same as your default weapon, or mostly just being clones of older weapons. Now, since Mega Man 9 is overtly meant to be as similar to Mega Man 2 as possible, this is all to be expected. But the issue is that there are games that came after this. Mega Man 10 isn't a sequel to Mega Man 8, it's a sequel to Mega Man 9, and so it picks up where Mega Man 9 leaves off. If Mega Man 9 was acting as Mega Man 2-2, I don't really know where that puts Mega Man 10 spiritually. Mega Man 2-3? Mega Man 2-2-2? Mega Man 4? In 2010, I think the group of people getting tired of pixel graphics and pixel music was starting to grow, but the Mega Man 2 supremacist elite was still raging strong. I think the zeitgeist of the time is encapsulated pretty well by this article, which I found on accident whilst looking for naked images of Strike Man in defense of Mega Man 10, because you're either part of my in-group or you're not. What makes Mega Man 10 great isn't its innovation, but its lack thereof. Mega Man 10 isn't trying to break the mold and deliver something new and extraordinary. This may seem drab and boring to the ever-growing crew of hobbyists I lovingly refer to as now Vaux gamers, setting the tone here that new things are bad. No extraordinary things for me, if you please. I prefer my games as uninteresting as possible. The series eventually evolved and broke off into what ultimately has become a fragmented franchise rife with garbage, but there are still shining lights in the sea of muck, and Capcom has wisely taken a cue from those beacons and decided to give us more.
Who could be angry with them for that? Yeah, it would have been pretty hard to get angry with them for that, especially if it had actually worked. Now, we have to do some detective work here, because multiple unspecified Mega Man games are being described as garbage, and the word fragmented here leads me to believe this is referring to the spin-off Mega Man series. Well, I mean, if you're looking for a good 2D action platformer game, yeah, you're not gonna find it in Mega Man Legends. It's a 3D RPG. I mean, maybe the series is rife with garbage now, but in 2010, really the only thing was Mega Man X7. That's only one game. It can't retroactively corrupt the entire rest of the franchise. I implore the skeptics and loudmouths to do one thing. Sit down and play an old Mega Man game. Ignore Mega Man 9 completely, and go back further. If you don't have access to an NES and the old cartridges, break out that Wii. Go to the Virtual Console. Yeah, for sure, man. Believe me, I would love to do that. Drop $5 on a game like Mega Man 3, opening parenthesis, my favorite game of all time, closing parenthesis. Remove yourself from the critical and snarky internet age and place yourself in, say, 1990. Let the classic music enter your ears as you browse the stage select screen, and then play. Experience the 8-bit Mega Man series' influence on gaming culture. Imagine a simpler time in gaming, when gameplay was the be-all end-all, the king of the block. Immerse yourself in the 8-bit sights and sounds, the difficult and rewarding play, and then come back here and tell me you aren't impressed with what that game not only did, but continues to do. Okay, I'm coming back and telling you that. What do I do now? While innovation has certainly driven the industry and the games we love forward, there would have been nothing to improve if not for this classic games. Now this part is interesting. Ridiculous, even. One could even describe it as cuckoo bonkers, mayhaps. The word improvements is used here, meaning that the experience is improved, so this is saying that there are changes that could be added to make the game better, but that they shouldn't be added, thus making the game worse on purpose. Mega Man 7 and 8 are regularly considered the worst games in the series by the most ardent fans of the franchise, so shouldn't that tell us all we need to know? Alright, if Mega Man 7 or 8 are your least favorite games in the series, please leave a comment on this video saying which one is the worst. If you like either Mega Man 7 or 8, please instead leave a comment that says that. We're gonna do a straw poll right here. We're gonna prove whether this is false. If you're a fan of the classic series, you're not gonna have a problem with what Capcom is attempting to do with Mega Man 10. But if you're not part of the in-group of people who have the same opinions, then you're a fake Mega Man fan and a poser. Go play Call of Duty, and maybe drink piss too, you loser. Now, maybe I'm being a little harsh here, and I don't think this article would have been written today, mainly because, you know, Mega Man 10 came out 12 years ago, but it shows that there were, and are, people out there who aren't capable of imagining a Mega Man game that has both good original level design and music and graphics made for modern hardware. It really does hold Mega Man 10 back this time, even more than with Mega Man 9, I think. For example, a huge part of Mega Man games has always been the music, and for Mega Man 10, they decided to do something special with it. The 8 Robot Master themes were composed by 8 different people, each of whom composed for at least one earlier Mega Man game. This is really cool, and it leads to this game having one of the most varied and interesting soundtracks out of any one of the entries. But despite each song being so different from one another, they're all in 8-bit. I think this is really limiting for some of the songs, and straight up just ruins Blade Man's theme. There's clearly so much personality hiding under the surface here, but the decision to bind the game to 1985 era hardware limitations stops it from getting to set itself apart. Mega Man 11, the most recent Mega Man 11, the most recent Mega Man game, was a chance to change this. From the very first trailer, we got to see 3-dimensional graphics and synth dubstep music or something. I don't really know what else to call it. Yeah, they were finally free to make music without any hardware limitations at all, and they went on to use the same one single instrument in every song. Anyway, the intention stated by the developers was to take the parts of each game that worked the best and combine them into this new game. A really promising premise, since out of everything in between Mega Man 11 and Mega Man 8, it was unclear which parts counted. Unfortunately, I think Mega Man 11 was still treated as a follow-up to Mega Man 10. There were some
aspects of earlier games brought over, but they were extremely subtle. For example, out of everything unique about Mega Man 8, really the only thing that was carried over was the voice acting, which is notorious in Mega Man 8 for being laughably bad and one of the worst parts of the game. Good choice. Out of what they chose to bring back, it seems like there's a lot more nostalgia bait than actually worthwhile gameplay enhancements. Listen, I'm not an infant. When I see a new Yellow Devil, I'm not gonna jump up and down while giggling and clapping my hands together. I have to save that for when I see Proto Man. I could excuse this if the game had made its own original changes, but there's really only one. The double gear system is the gimmick of Mega Man 11. It's incorporated into the core moveset for both the player and the bosses, into the stage design. It makes up basically the entire story. Even the name of the game in Japan is Rockman 11, Gears of Fate. The thing is, though, this really is just a gimmick. You can get through the entire game without using it a single time, and for most of the game you probably will. The general gameplay experience is just going through the game using the Mega Buster, maybe reaching a tough boss and remembering it exists, using a power gear to make that boss jokingly easy, and then going back on your way again, forgetting about its existence. I can't help but to think, in Mega Man 12, if there ever is a Mega Man 12, I really doubt the double gear system is gonna stick around. Like, it wouldn't be such a big part of this game if it was intended to be a permanent gameplay change. Besides this, there's pretty much just cosmetic changes, and there isn't even much original level design to make it worthwhile. There's like 6 bosses here that are basically just cloned from Mega Man 1. So yes, I finally get to play through an ice level that isn't in 8-bit, but it's still just an ice level. There's some point in time where the Mega Man series started being a retro series rather than just a series, and I think this is a symptom of that. This is why we barely get any new games anymore, and it's also why each one that does happen is a celebration or spiritual successor to the old ones, or just a straight up collection of the old ones, which is what we usually actually get. This is why Mega Man 2 supremacy is an issue. If everyone thinks of an NES game when Mega Man is mentioned, then the series gets treated as an NES series. I mentioned earlier how Pokémon games have a thing where they add one superficial gimmick to make the game sell, and then immediately remove it in the next installment, and I'm a little concerned the Mega Man series might end up like that if this type of thing keeps happening. Just kidding, we would actually need to get new games for that. Okay, so if not changing the formula equals bad, but when Mega Man 11 changes it, it still equals bad, then which games actually did it not bad? Well, Mega Man Powered Up is an example of a game that still didn't do it right. To be fair, I have not actually played this one on account of I don't own a Sony PISP. However, I don't see how some of the changes it makes can be anything but detrimental to the overall game. Not all of them, that is. I appreciate the tutorial stage, I like the fact that you have like 20 possible playable characters, and I'm always a fan of level creation tools. The thing is, this game is a remake of Mega Man 1. The purpose of Mega Man Powered Up is to take everything special about Mega Man 1 and remove it. The 6 Robot Masters in Mega Man 1 have some of the best matchups in the entire series. Each boss's weakness actually made logical sense and could be pieced together from clues in the boss's attacks and how the stages were set up. But Powered Up wanted to have 8 Robot Masters just like Mega Man 2, so it added 2 more stages and threw the entire cycle off balance. In the original game, Gutsman's weakness was the bomb weapon. Because the entire stage takes place in a mine, he stands in a cave during the fight, surrounded by and using rocks, and bombs are used in mines to clear away and destroy rock. In Powered Up, Gutsman's weakness is the weapon that slows time down, because one of the bosses needs to be weak to that, so might as well be him, I guess. Everything that made Mega Man 1 special is gone in the interest of making it more homogeneous. It's like every new change is to make the game have less change. It doesn't make any sense. So what about a game that changes the formula in a more creative way? How about Mega Man and Bass? This game starts out with an opening stage that has exactly 0 new enemies. I think it has more assets copied and pasted from Mega Man 8 than actual original ones. And it's not like these elements are put in new situations or combined in new ways, it's really just the same stuff
Again, this game is still held back by Mega Man 2 supremacy, but despite all this, it's still one of the most unique games in the series. This is the first game to let you choose between multiple playable characters. It has an entire new progression system. It has an upgrade system in the shop, kind of similar to the Mega Man X games. E-tanks and Rush Jet and Rush Coil are also removed, which I think actually balances the game more. I even like how it gives you a tutorial on how to best use every weapon in between the core game and the Wily stages, despite the fact that it's implemented in a horribly ham-fisted way. One of the upgrades you can get in the shop gives you hints about what weapon the bosses are weak to, which is a really useful addition, and after seeing how it works, now I kind of wish some of the other games had it as well, especially the newer ones where the boss matchups are essentially unpredictable. Unfortunately, none of these changes got a serious chance, because the game is really bad. It's not the fact that the game is 16-bit that makes it bad though, nor is it the lack of E-tanks, or Rush Jet, or the collectathon with CDs, or even the weird flowchart looking progression system. The stages just suck, and the boss fights are all horrible also. It just isn't a fun game, which is a shame. Just because the game isn't well designed doesn't mean every innovation it made should just be dropped, and I would have liked to see some of them stick around.
Now I'd like to talk about one of my favorite Mega Man games, the last one to be released on Game Boy. That's right, it's the noise a hairdryer makes. Now, most of the Game Boy games were just adaptations of their NES counterparts, but not Mega Man 5. That's right, they finally had an idea. The 8 Robot Masters are named after the 9 planets of the solar system, which does not include Earth, but does include Pluto because this game is from the past. Now, the downside to this is that guessing which bosses are weak to which weapons is very difficult / impossible. However, the bosses are divided into sets of 4, so, like I explained before, it isn't nearly as much of a problem. And in fact, these 2 sets of 4 are actually woven into the story, since the first 4 take place on alien spaceships, and the last 4 take place on the alien planets themselves. See, I like this in particular because on a Game Boy, there's really no point to coming up with creative environments separate from the stage design itself, because it would never come through on the calculator graphics anyway. They totally can just make the first 4 stages take place in identical spaceships, and it actually fits the console better. Even the story is actually fairly unique, which is very rare in a Mega Man game. This results in an actually really entertaining and creative final boss, instead of just the same identical Wily capsule copied and pasted into the game again. On top of all of that, Mega Man 5 on Game Boy even changes the core moveset of Mega Man himself, introducing the Mega Arm in place of how the charge shot normally works. Now you can hit enemies multiple times with a single shot, which is rewarding to pull off, and the distance your shot goes is also limited now, which introduces an entirely new layer of gameplay. One of the bosses can suck your shots in, and if you use the Mega Arm, he will steal it from you. Do you understand me? He steals your arm from you. This game is, I think, the gold standard for what parts of the core Mega Man formula should be changed, and exactly how those things can be changed. Coincidentally, it also happens to be one of the best Mega Man games in general, only held back by its native hardware. So if any game should get copied in future games, it should be this one. So, let's get back to Mega Man 2. This is still an episode of the Everything Review, so my task here is to give Mega Man 2 a rating out of 10, and put it on the list somewhere to compare it to everything else. I always see everyone else giving it great phenomenal ratings, 9s and 10s out of 10, whereas all my favorite Mega Man games get 7s and 8s. So, here's what I'm gonna do. Mega Man 2 is a mid game, as I've explained, but since it has so many ratings that are way too high from so many other people, I just like to balance out the scales. If you take every rating of the game in existence and average them out, I want that average to be pretty close to the middle. So what I'm gonna do here is just go ahead and give it a negative 6,000 out of 10. So that way, if you average out every rating the game has gotten, the score gets brought down to something closer to what I agree with. Because don't forget here, my opinion is factually correct. Oh, but wait. You didn't forget, did you? You imbecile? You blithering cretin? You forgot our iconic peepees rule, which clearly dictates that any game containing peepees gets a full number added to its score. That means Mega Man 2 in fact will be receiving a negative 5,999 out of 10. Comparing that score to the list of everything else I've given a score to, I mean, you can see it's looking pretty rough for Mega Man number 2 over here. Even the worst rated genocide I've done, the Armenian genocide, is several thousand points above it, so I gotta say, Mega Man 2 ain't looking good in the grand scheme of things. I don't have any other Mega Man games on this list to compare with Mega Man 2 as of yet, but depending on how well this video performs, more videos like this one will probably get made. So if you want to see more videos of this type, then please share this one around with people and in communities where it belongs. It all depends on this one, so if this video fails, then I'll probably go back to the normal type of things you've been seeing. And if it fails really badly, I'll probably just delete the channel and possibly off myself. I've been working on this video in one form or another for actually over 2 years at this point, so if you just showed up at the Morbius video and have no idea what I'm talking about, first of all, genuinely impressive if you watched the entire thing. Second of all, hey, there's a cool action platformer series you might want to try. There was something else I was gonna say at the end of the video, but I forgot it. Sorry about that. Megaman.